Next slide, please. If we can just back up one. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Rob for this session.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we could go to my first slide, please. So that hasn't updated on my screen yet. Oh, if you could go back one, please.
Sorry, it's being a bit slow. From there?
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the session today on the power beneath the waves, S&T for the underwater environment. My name is Rob, and I'm a senior principal scientist here at Dstl. And I have chosen the term power quite deliberately in the title, as it links to the joint doctrine publication on UK maritime power, which you've already just seen a snapshot on. So if you could move on the slide, please. Okay, so that defines maritime power to be the ability to apply maritime military capabilities at and from the sea to influence the behaviour of actors and the course of events. So my talk today is going to focus on the contribution of underwater science and technology to developing these maritime capabilities. Next slide, please. Oh, we're speeding up, that's great. So a note on content. So I'm going to be briefing at official today. What does that mean in practice? Well, as I'll describe, the underwater environment is challenging by its very nature. It lends itself to stealthy and covert operation. And that means maintaining the element of surprise is vitally important. So while I'm going to be giving an insight into underwater S&T, I won't be able to cover the detail which is above official. However, what I will be demonstrating today is how exciting and vibrant the underwater research area is, and the ways in which we're looking to engage with a broad range of external partners in both industry and academia. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, bottom line up front, what I've started off by sharing with you the cross-cutting challenge areas for the underwater systems S&T program. I'll come back to these later on in the talk, but I thought it'd be useful for you to see them up front so that you can think how you could contribute to the program as we move through the slides. So the way I've structured the talk, I'll start off with some background, setting out why I believe underwater is important. And I'll then move on to the underwater systems S&T program. So noting that I'm going to be briefing today at official, I'm going to set out the key themes for the program, and then I'll use some case studies to give you a flavour of the work that we do. And then I'll come back to these challenge areas in more detail. Obviously, the aim of today, we're keen to increase engagement with our external suppliers. So I'll talk about how you can get involved, and then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we focus on underwater, a look at the importance of maritime to the UK. So we're an island nation, and the maritime environment is vitally important in terms of our economy, our diplomacy, and our defence. So around 95% of UK imports and exports are transported by sea. And on the left, the Maritime 2050 strategy sets out the UK government's vision for the future of the British maritime sector, with a strong emphasis on science and technology. The image in the centre shows the UK vessel RFA Argus supporting the US in disaster relief efforts off Honduras. And on the right, from a defence perspective, well, I've already talked about UK maritime power, and Nick Jode talked about in his address, talked about the output from the recent integrated review, which is the other document there. And that really sets out how the UK can sustain strategic advantage through S&T, and it emphasises the importance of the maritime. So for us, two particular areas, new aircraft carriers and the UK's continuous at-sea deterrent. Okay, next slide, please. So from a UK defence perspective, let's wait for the slide to catch up there. Why is underwater important and unique? Well, in a world which is becoming increasingly visible and interconnected, the underwater environment remains a challenging domain in which to operate. So to start with, it's an incredibly harsh physical environment in which to operate. So it's highly corrosive, subject to extremes of pressure. It's highly variable. So tides and currents, variation in water depth, variation in water properties, so salinity, density, temperature, etc. It's huge. So the oceans alone cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. So that's a large area, but by going underwater, we also introduce massive volumes. And of course, it's environmentally sensitive. So S&T very much has a part to play here by ensuring that the solutions we develop are environmentally responsible. Now, many of the traditional go-to systems that we rely on in the surface domain are not effective underwater. In particular, sensing, navigation, and communications are a real challenge. For example, the underwater environment's opaque to sensors like radar, while to other sensors, it presents varying degrees of transmission. So, of course, the best known of these is probably acoustic sensing or sonar. But even sonar is subject to significant spatial and temporal variability and lots of clutter. So a whole range of factors make underwater sensing really challenging. And the same goes for navigation and communications underwater, which are all difficult when compared with the above water domain. So I've just set out lots of challenges there. However, if we can overcome those challenges, then for all of the same reasons, the underwater environment is a great place to hide. And of course, this applies equally to ourselves and our adversaries. And really that sets up the twin pillars for underwater. Firstly, trying to covertly operate our own forces. And secondly, being able to detect our adversaries. Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. So when we talk about underwater capability, most people immediately think of submarines. And of course, they are a vital component. However, underwater capability is much more. So, of course, yeah, in the picture I have submarine there, but also we have a whole range of surface vessels. So, for example, Type 23 frigate tows sonar arrays. We have vessels supporting the clearance and disposal of sea mines, underwater survey vessels. We also use air systems. So the Merlin Mark II helicopter deploys sonar systems, and we have a new capability coming online with the maritime patrol aircraft. There's an increasing use of autonomy and autonomous systems. And finally, of course, we shouldn't forget the human element, which is still vitally important to the whole enterprise. And it's important to note that it's not just these platforms that are important, but all of the systems that they bring to bear on the underwater environment. If you could build the slide, please. This will just emphasize that science and technology cuts across all of these areas, and it's informed by the mod S&T strategy that Nick Jode talked about in his opening address. Okay, if we could go on to the next slide, please. Can I just check my screen hasn't updated yet? Is that correct?
I'm showing page 12. Is that correct?
So I am currently on the underwater systems program themes. It's the next slide. Is that the one you're currently on?
I'm on S&T case study 1.
Yeah, if we could just go back one, please.
Sure.
That's great. My screen, do apologise everyone, my screen was slow to update there. Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so these are the 4 themes for the underwater systems S&T program. The first one, geospatial intelligence gathering. So that's all about developing ways to gather, interpret and exploit information about the underwater environment. And as we've seen, this is really important due to its inherent variability and the impact that it has on underwater systems, such as sensing. Second theme is remote mine countermeasures. So exploring the use of uncrewed and autonomous systems to detect and neutralize the naval mine threat. The third theme is anti-submarine warfare, or ASW. I'll use that acronym throughout. And that's really supporting the capability to detect, track, deter, and neutralize underwater threat platforms. And then the fourth theme is submarine capability. So ensuring our submarines can safely and effectively operate in the challenging underwater environment. And in order to give a flavour of some of the underwater S&T that supports these themes, I'm now going to go on and just look at 3 case studies. So if we could go on to the first case study, please, number 1. Cool. Okay, so this is all about understanding the underwater environment. And the challenge here was to develop ways of understanding that environment and ensuring the data could then be exploited in an efficient and timely way to inform command decisions. And there's a particular focus on this work with the use of autonomous and uncrewed systems. So this resulted in Project MASMO, and that stands for Marine Autonomous Systems in Support of Marine Observations. It was a flexible research activity, and it explored a range of autonomous concepts for gathering underwater environmental data. And it was mainly centered around exploring surface and underwater gliders. There were a series of trials and demonstrator missions under MASMO that explored and tested the concepts, and that resulted in an eventual focus on underwater gliders. As a sign of its success, the Royal Navy wanted to understand how the S&T conducted under MASMO could be used in an operational context. And so they funded a follow-on project called Hecla. There was a broad range of external partners on MASMO from both industry and academia. Too many to credit everyone individually here, but the delivery team was normally led by the National Oceanography Centre. We worked closely with the UK Hydrographic Office, the Royal Navy, of course, and the Met Office. And the outputs from MASMO and Hecla are now being exploited by the Royal Navy to inform their future requirements for underwater environmental understanding. So principally in the areas of military data gathering and rapid environmental assessment. Next slide, please. So we'll go on to S&T case study 2. So this is slightly different flavour, and actually it fits well into the theme of today about supercharging science. So this one is all about the anti-submarine warfare, or ASW, spearhead. So the S&T component here is part of a much wider Navy programme, and the challenge to the S&T community was to accelerate the pull-through of technologies from the S&T locker, if you like, to enhance ASW capability. So very much along the lines that our initial speakers were talking about today. And so this was really all about rapid exploitation of those higher technology readiness level concepts that we had within the S&T programs. So the Spearhead drew on a broad range of S&T suppliers, and it's using a combination of experimentation and in-water demonstration of a wide cross-section of underwater systems technologies. The S&T component of Spearhead is also providing scientific advice across the wider Navy program as well. You can see we've got a good selection of partners from both externally and within the MOD. And there's a really strong exploitation path with this work here. And I've listed some of the outputs in the top right. So for example, we've got capability enhancements to in-service sonar systems, the development of novel sonar buoys and alternative deployment mechanisms, the use of maritime autonomous systems for ASW, enhancing situational awareness and decision aids, and tactical protocols for ASW. Next slide, please. So we'll go on to the case study number 3. So the final case study is all about optimizing information flows to support the command team within the submarine control room. So the challenge here is that the control room on a submarine is incredibly busy, and the command team are required to manipulate increasing amounts of data and information. And in particular, the decisions made using that information can be time critical and are often made under pressure. So the approach taken within the S&T program was to build a physical simulator to explore the interactions between members of the command team. And this was known as COMTET, the Command Team Experimentation Testbed. So the team used modified commercial gaming software to provide a taxing information environment, and that enabled them to first understand and then optimize the flow of information between command team members. The research is already being used to inform alternative designs for the submarine control room that increase efficiency and capacity for the teams that work there. So the partner here, we have an academic partner, University of Southampton, and a really good level of exploitation. So as you can see, COMTET has now transitioned from an S&T program to a technology demonstrator program that's sponsored by Defence Nuclear Organisation with governance and funding from the Submarine Delivery Agency. And further trials are planned looking at novel human-machine interfaces to support new ways of working within the command room. And that includes things like alternative roles, new procedures, and updates to training regimes. And the research is already influencing enhanced ways of working within the astute control room. Next slide, please. Okay, so the aim of those case studies was to give you a flavour of the breadth of work that we undertake within the underwater systems S&T programme. And I shared these with you earlier. They're the cross-cutting challenge areas for the programme. So the first two areas, underwater weapons and underwater defensive aids, I'm afraid I can't say much more about these at official, but they are of continuing interest to the programme. If we move down, environmental understanding, so we've seen how the underwater environment is highly variable and the importance of maintaining a good understanding of that and being able to exploit the data in a timely manner. Uncrewed systems and autonomy, so in common with other domains, this is an area of increasing importance, and it cuts across many of these themes. Indeed, the majority of projects probably have some flavour of autonomy within them. And linked to that, moving down, we then have machine learning and AI. So how do we make efficient and effective use of the increasingly large amounts of data that we can gather, and importantly, support our command teams to make informed and timely decisions with it? And plus, of course, we've got the use of autonomy and uncrewed systems, which may be at range. So how can AI and machine learning support that? Signature mitigation and control. Well, I've talked about how one of the key drivers for using the underwater environment is the ability for stealthy and covert operation. So ways of mitigating and controlling signature are definitely of interest. Underwater C4I. So for those not familiar with the acronym, that stands for Command, Control, Communications, Computers and Intelligence. And I've talked about the challenge of effective communications underwater, which are particularly important. For example, if we were to look to control an uncrewed system at range. Propulsors, so we're interested in S&T relating to submarine propulsion systems, and concepts and integration. So this is all about different ways of working and developing innovative concepts for future capability. Decision making, and this is at all levels. So it could be, for example, S&T to support high-level evidence-based decision making, or a little bit like we saw in the ComTet example, it could be decision support tools for command teams. So that's quite a broad one. Underwater survivability. So this links to the harsh physical environment, whether from natural or human effects, and the need for underwater systems to be both resilient and survivable. And then last but not least, sensing. And I've talked on the challenge of underwater sensing, and we're interested in a broad range of sensing from acoustic, which I've mentioned, through to other novel methods. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so how can you get involved? So we're keen to strengthen our engagement with the external supply base. Approximately 75% of the underwater systems program is delivered externally by our suppliers in partnership with Dstl. And the program has seen strong and sustained growth. And this is really exciting. It means that we're able to consolidate our core capabilities while also increasing the breadth of activities that we can do. And for example, Nick Jode and Doug Umbers talked at the beginning about the MOD science and technology strategy and that focus on generation after next capabilities. Dstl uses a range of commercial frameworks and selects the most appropriate route for each contract. And there's a link included here for how you can work with Dstl. Plus our commercial colleagues will be giving a detailed brief later this afternoon if you have any questions. So some of the frameworks used recently by the Underwater Systems Programme include the Progeny Maritime Research Framework, Astrid, Serapis and rCloud. But there are many more, and they're all, you can get to those from that link. So we're also planning a future Searchlight event as a webinar to continue the engagement, and we have a provisional date of the 15th of November for that. And we see today's event and the future Searchlight webinar as a great opportunity to increase our engagement with our external suppliers, be that existing suppliers or perhaps new suppliers from maybe from non-defense related areas. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a brief look at the Progeny Maritime Research Framework. So one of the things that we do under that is we support a broad and dynamic maritime community of interest known as Team Rhodos. So that comprises well over 100 organisations of all types. And as you can see from the graphic here, we've got a good mix of larger organisations, we've got small and medium-sized enterprises, we've got academia and research organisations. Next slide, please. And then finally, another community of interest that's relevant here, the UK Acoustics Network. So that was established in 2017, with the aim of supporting a strong and sustainable UK acoustics research and user community. So it's attracted about just under £2 million worth of funding from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. And we've got over 1,300 members to date from industry and academia. It's free to join for researchers, practitioners and users of acoustics. And it's structured around currently 16 specialist interest groups. So a particular relevance for today, one of those special interest groups covers underwater acoustics. And there's a contact email on the bottom right-hand side of the slide, if you'd like to follow that up. And there's also a group on early careers acoustic research, and that's supported with a program of webinars and training. Okay, and then if we move on to the next slide, please. That's the end of the talk today. Thank you very much for listening. There's an opportunity now for Q&A, and I've put my little banner down there, so just noting that I am only able to respond today at official. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Right, everybody. So we've got about 15 minutes or so for questions before the break. So as you can see, you've got this is the Slido format. So if you go onto slido.com and then use the code DSTL-1045-power, you can place a question in there. So Rob, if it's all okay, we'll take the ones that are on screen at the moment that have been voted up to the top.
Yeah, sure.
So this first question here from Ian Mayo, program challenge area slide. You know, he makes the point here that machine learning AI may be a contribution to the other challenge areas rather than representing a challenge in itself. I just wondered, do you maybe have a comment on that within sort of the realms of what we can say about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a good question, Ian. So I think that's true, and one of the other talks today in these parallel sessions are looking at things like machine learning, AI and autonomy as a cross-cutting discipline. So you're absolutely correct, it cuts across a whole load of things, a little bit like I mentioned about autonomy and uncrewed systems. I think what our thinking behind that is there can be a difference between the generic research that's undertaken into machine learning and AI, and then that application to a particular domain area. So in today's context, I'm thinking about in this talk, the underwater environment, but it could equally apply to the above water environment, to land, air, or space. So the way we tend to structure it around the programs is we do the cross-cutting work in one of those cross-cutting programs, but actually when we need to make it specific and relevant to an environment, and some of the challenges, specific challenges, do come from an understanding of the environment and the type of data, the amount of data. That's when the program particularly it's of interest to the program, and you tend to find there's a handshake. So the work will be done generically. There'll be a link up with one of the domain programs, and then that piece of work may then transition into a domain program where it becomes domain specific to get down to some of those challenges. But there's always that link back to the cross-cutting program to ensure we can share lessons learned and insights. So I appreciate it's a hub and spoke model, I guess you could think about it, with some of that cross-cutting work happening in the hub, and then the domains sitting out on the spokes around the edge. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you. We'll go down and take the second one then. So from Holly Turner, I am a meteorologist. I would be interested to know more about your work with the Met Office. Do you ever employ meteorologists directly?
So we work very closely with the Met Office. We also work with our colleagues in the Royal Navy who have specialists in this area as well. I'm just trying to think. I'm sure. So we will have undertaken work that requires meteorological inputs. I say if working with colleagues in either the Met Office or the Navy, there may be a requirement to contract meteorologists directly. That, to my knowledge, we don't have one at the moment, but that's not to say there won't be a requirement for that in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. So the next one that's jumped up to the top here is from Steve Brunton. You said that the maritime autonomy is pervasive across many projects. So how is Dstl ensuring that MA coherence across the different research areas? Is there a single point, focal point?
Yes, and again, this comes back to very much the hub and spoke model that I talked about earlier for a lot of these cross-cutting areas. So autonomy, you could think of as being a hub, sort of the cross-cutting autonomy work, then moving out into the sort of domains focused spokes to deal with these specific challenges. Obviously, underwater is what we're thinking about today, but that applies equally for those unique challenges within the surface environment, the land environment, and the air environment.
Okay, great. So we've got another question here from Olivia. So do we work with physiologists when developing capabilities in the underwater environment?
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah. So we have programs that deal with physiologists. Yeah, that's obviously an important part of the capability. And I mentioned right up at the beginning that human element is still really, really important. So that's why I specifically included the graphic there, just to emphasize it's not just systems and platforms, it's the human interaction with that and the people within the system that are really, really important. So that's a good question, yes.
Thank you, Rob. So next one that's jumped up to the top here. For all of those key themes in problem spaces, is there any area of Dstl which specifically looks at the manufacturability of solutions or adoption of advanced manufacturing technologies? And what would be the best entry point into Dstl for such discussions?
So I would suggest that we can provide the contact details for the Materials for Strategic Advantage program will probably be the best port of entry for you, David, there.
That's great. We'll dig those out, David, and I'll try and put them in the chat as we go on in the next 10 minutes or so. It's okay. If we move on to the next one, how do you ensure that the options and solutions you are researching offer best value for money?
So that's a good question, and it's one that's always in the forefront of our minds, because as has been said in the opening session, this is all about taxpayers' money here, and we want to make sure that whatever we do, it is being spent for the best and most efficient use for that taxpayers' money. So that's always at the forefront of our minds. That goes through from the very high level creation of the programs that we've got, through to some of that underpinning support to decision making that I talked about. So that sort of evidence-based decision making for why we want to do things, and why that makes sense, and why it's the best option to follow is very much part of both the thinking but also the work that we do.
Okay, thank you. There's two here which I think maybe we take together, the top one and the second one, and appreciate, Robbie, maybe somewhat limited to what you can say on sort of specifics. But is there any interest in application of laser-based technology for underwater imaging, sensing, and communications? And then more specifically, is there any work on digital twins and the better use of data being examined?
Okay, so I think both of those areas would be a yes. So we are interested in anything that offers an advantage that fits into those sort of very, and I appreciated official, they were quite broad, those very broad areas. So yes, and with a particular focus on generation after next and future technologies, anything that applies would be of interest to us in the program. Yeah.
Okay, and then you see we've had one come in now in regards to quantum sensing for navigation.
Yeah, and I think probably the same answer applies there. Actually, it's a good question, and it's something that we are interested in, definitely. And again, it fits into that that future capabilities piece. So yeah.
Okay. Question here from Hugh. So how do we go around advertising, specific issues, what we want support on? So how do we go around making people aware of the sort of work we need help on?
Okay, so part of that is events like today, and I appreciate at official it was quite broad, but we've got let's say we use a number of contractual frameworks to advertise the work that we've got coming up. So I think we're running I mentioned that we're running a follow-on event, a webinar in November. Although I'm limited on what I can say today in terms of just preempting the next question about the budget and the funding for the program at official. I hope to be able to give you more of an insight at that next webinar event in November.
Thank you, Rob. And just to sort of row in behind that, there will be a series of Dstl SME Searchlight events sort of after the summer holidays, giving greater opportunity for sort of some of these deep dive areas, a chance to have more of a two-way conversation, and hopefully we will be looking at sort of what areas of sort of classification and so forth that those potentially can go at beyond of what we can achieve today. So thank you for those questions. But we will be advertising those again more thoroughly and as part of our engagement with industry. So we've got a couple of minutes left. If we go down to Tim Tozer from the University of York, you mentioned the UK Acoustics Network. Is this something you actually fund, or is it a freestanding interest forum?
Oh, so it is a wider forum. Yes, so it's supported by the EPSRC and the Institute of Acoustics, and it's run in partnership with Imperial College London. But obviously, as part of that acoustics community, it's something that we are keen to support and keen to advertise, and indeed keen to be engaged with as well.
Okay, well, we covered the second one there. So for SMEs developing low TRL technologies with strategic potential, what's the best way to approach Dstl for collaboration?
So I would say to get involved with some of the frameworks that I've talked about and that our commercial colleagues are going to be talking about later on this afternoon. And of course, as you are doing, engaging with these events with our supply base, so that you can understand more about what our requirements are and where we're coming from, and we get to have that discussion. And I think probably for the webinar, the Searchlight event, there will be some more focused sessions within that, as I understand it.
Thank you. We have covered the second and third one up here in terms of budgets and finances. I just wondered is there anything more you're able to help with, Steve, in terms of understanding perhaps how whether budgets are set annually, is there just one route of opportunity to get in at the start, or is there the ability to sort of have that enduring relationship and come in at different parts of it throughout the year?
Yeah, no, that's true. We can and we do set multi-year contracts. So again, that goes back to the requirement at the beginning that sets out what we want to contract, why we want to do it, and what is best value for money ultimately for the taxpayer. So that's our whole strategy for how we would set out the competition at the beginning. But yes, we certainly do advertise for multi-year contracts.
Thank you. So in terms of key contacts and ways of sort of further points of discussion for greater detail, is there a route in for people on the call today in terms of who we could signpost them to?
So certainly the Searchlight event, but also I'm thinking we could have it's perhaps something we should set up separately as an inbox for to allow points of contact if people do have perhaps specific questions. But that's something I could take away to explore.
Great. In the meantime, I've put in an email address into the chat, which is for central inquiries. And so perfect. if people did want to get in contact in the immediacy, then if you do contact that can find its way into us. But Rob's just mentioned about looking at other ways, but certainly do keep an eye out for communications coming out to us about SME searchlights and other things, because we will be stepping up the engagement for this year. Okay, just a couple more then. There was one I wanted to take that I'd seen that it had come through. Someone had mentioned about slides from today being shared. Well, today's session has been recorded, and so we will be making that available. We will be, just taking a quick look at them, but we do have a plan to sort of share as much information with you as possible. I don't know if you wanted to say anything more about that, Rob.
No, I'm very happy for those to be shared in accordance with what we're doing for the for the rest of the presentations and things.
Yeah, I suppose that this next question, it might be one which we simply don't know, but do we have any indication about sort of a 5-year strategy beyond 2022? I know obviously we've just quite recently got the latest 4-year strategy for the integrated review and so forth, and defence programs. Is there anything that we're able to help this person with here?
So I'm not aware myself. I'm afraid. So I'm afraid I can't help on that one.
Okay, we'll take the next one. If they're not already involved in the Progeny Maritime community, how can they participate?
So the Progeny framework is just one of many frameworks that we support. I believe people can apply to get involved with that, but equally people can apply to get involved with many of the other frameworks as well. So I think probably our commercial colleagues can talk in more detail on that to much better detail than I'm able to at the commercial session.
Okay, great.
So if I could defer that question to this afternoon's session, please.
Of course, thank you. I think we've answered the next one. We've put an email address into the link for people if they want to make contact following this event, but also do keep an eye out for us advertising the SME Searchlight events. And then we can take this one, I think, as the final question as we've reached time. The pull through of research as key driver going forward. So do we anticipate any more TDPS going forward to support development?
Yes, so technology demonstrator programs or demonstrator programs of some sort. I think that's a good assumption to make. There, I'm sure there will be further opportunities to demonstrate that pull through with TDP like activities. Can't give any details, I'm afraid, but I think that's a good assumption.
That's fine. I've just seen there's one in the chat. There's one in the chat here, which I think is probably a relevant question. and one you get asked a lot about sort of classification management. So are we, Nick, Joe today emphasised the R&D pipeline and the need and the emphasis on pull through, and we obviously always have issues to some extent with classification. So do we have any indication yet about any sort of classification management to enable, further discussions and understanding of pipelines stuff for underwater challenges?
So I think we're on the beginning of that journey, and today is the start of that. So so I appreciate it. At the times it's been fairly high level, but it's we are seeking to share as much detail as we are able within that regime of classification.
Excellent. Well, I think that concludes this session. We just have gone slightly over. I'm going to hand over to an ADS colleague, I think, who might just run us through some housekeeping for the follow-on sessions. Is that right?